Welcome to the next in our series of online lectures for Western Civ 1. Today we are going to take a closer look at the Greek polis by studying two specific polis within ancient Greece. Those two cities were Sparta and Athens. Now, as always, there are some key terms and some key questions that I'd like you to be able to answer when you get to the end of this session. So anyway, pay attention to those, and that said, let's get to it. Before we talk about Sparta and Athens, however, let's do a little review. This is what we talked about in the last lecture. For example, in 2000 BCE, the Mycenaean people will migrate into Greece. By 1400 to 1200 BCE, that is the peak of Mycenaean civilization. Remember, the Mycenaeans had spread throughout the Mediterranean and Aegean seas. They were extensive traders and extensive sailors. And they had built themselves up into a regional power by the time we get to 1400 to 1200. By 1100 BCE, however, the Mycenaean culture had collapsed. And this will inaugurate the Greek Dark Age, from 1100 to about 750 BCE. The Greek Dark Age was the period at which trade completely shut down. The Greeks lost the ability to write. Greek food production took a nosedive, and the Greek population collapsed as well. As we said in the last lecture, possibly 90% of the Greek population disappeared during this Greek Dark Age. So anyway, civilization itself was in decline in Greece during these Greek Dark Ages. After the Greek Dark Age ended, however, around 750 BCE, Greek society began to recover, and many historians credit an institution called the polis for that recovery. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail on defining the polis, because I did that in the last lecture. However, basically what you need to remember is that a polis was in many respects simply a community, but it was a community that granted rights to its citizens, and in return expected its citizens to serve that community. Today we are going to look closely at two of the polis that were dominant in Greek society. And we're going to do so, we're going to see how the polis worked. The two polis that we are going to study in this lecture are Sparta and Athens. We'll begin with Sparta, which was located on a far southern peninsula of Greece, known as the Peloponnesus. You can see it there on the map. It's where the arrow is pointed. Like all Greek societies, Sparta was divided into distinct social classes. At the very bottom of that society were a class of slaves known as helots. The slave or helot population of Sparta was so huge that it actually became a threat to the polis itself. In the 7th century, the helots revolted and nearly overthrew the ruling class of Sparta. To prevent such a thing from happening again, the Spartans transformed their society in a way that made them one of the most powerful polis in all of Greece. Legend has it that that transformation was the idea of a great Spartan leader named Lycurgus. Now, no one today knows if Lycurgus was an actual person or not. However, the Spartans referred to the new laws as the Lycurgan reforms. So, what did the Lycurgan reforms do? Well, in short, they militarized Spartan society. When I say that Spartan society was militarized, I mean it truly was militarized from top to bottom. It began at birth, when supposedly every child born to a Spartan citizen was examined. Healthy children were allowed to live. Sickly or weak infants, however, were killed. It was believed that if Sparta was to survive and to remain strong, she would need only healthy, strong citizens. And so therefore, they didn't mess around. At birth, if you weren't healthy, you were discarded. For boys who survived this test, the next step occurred at age 7, when they were taken from their families and enrolled in a special military academy. That academy was focused largely on training these young men to be soldiers. Young men, young boys, I should say, were taught in this school to fight and to survive. The next step occurred at the age of 20, when Spartan young men were drafted into the army. If they managed to live for 10 years to the age of 30, they were granted full Spartan citizenship. They would have the right to participate in Spartan government. Spartan women, though they did not serve in the army, nor were they given the right to participate in government, did have greater autonomy or freedom than women in other Greek cities, however. This is because women were expected to raise and indoctrinate their sons with the ideas of Spartan honor, courage, and valor. Athens was located in eastern Greece on a peninsula called Attica. And you can see on the map above where the arrow is pointing. That's Athens. Whereas Sparta developed a military dictatorship, Athens developed a very different type of society. Under Cleisthenes, Athens developed into one of the world's first democracies. In fact, the word democracy comes from the Greek words for people and power. Yet Cleisthenes did not mean what we mean when we talk about democracy. After all, only 5 to 10% of Athens' male population were citizens with full rights. At its peak, that was probably no more than 4,000 people. The rest of Athens, slaves, women, and non-citizen residents, had no say in the administration of the polis. Still, compared to other societies in both Greece or anywhere in the world at this time, really, Athens was quite democratic. For example, all male citizens participated in what was called the Citizens' Assembly. The Citizens' Assembly was essentially the government of Athens. It was this assembly that approved all new laws within Athenian society. Democracy even extended to the military, where even military leaders were elected. These generals, known in Athens as strategoi, or strategoi, I don't know how to pronounce it, let me admit it, served a one-year term, but they could be re-elected multiple times. So therefore, Athens even elects its generals. That's a pretty wild concept, even for our society today. In conclusion, we can now see how the structure of the polis and of Greek society changed from city to city. Yet at heart, the same ideas governed both Sparta and Athens, and really all Greek polis, for that matter. Both Athens and Sparta believed that citizens had certain rights, and in exchange for those rights, were responsible to serve the state. Also, both polis were highly united and inspired fierce loyalty among its citizens. Now, let's move on to the next lecture, and we're going to see what happens when Greece faces its first major outside threat.